Welcome to the Parenting Tips Podcast. I'm Jeff Reiland, the host of this series. Have you ever experienced disappointment that something you were looking forward to did not happen as you planned? Chances are very good that this has happened to you sometime in your life, and this is normal. Chances are also pretty good that you found a workaround to the situation. You were able to bounce back from the disappointments and think about the situation in a new and different way. If you've been able to do this, you were engaging in something called flexible thinking. We're talking about flexible thinking in this episode. The skill of flexible thinking helps children to deal with change, uncertainty, problem solve, and absorb new information when they're making decisions. Flexible thinking is a critical part of a child's ability to engage in self-regulation and manage those intense emotions that are a common part of childhood. Flexible thinking is actually one of two skills that are part of a complex developmental process known as cognitive flexibility. Flexible thinking occurs when a child is able to think about problems or situations in new and different ways. When a child struggles with this, they tend to get stuck in rigid thinking. They just can't see another way to solve the problem. Set shifting refers to a child's ability to transition from that old way of doing things or thinking about something to trying a new way of doing something. In this episode, we're going to blend those two skills together and refer to them as flexible thinking. Let's take a closer look at examples that you may be able to recognize as an adult. When you're driving and there is a road closed with a detour, you're likely to find an alternate route. That would be flexible thinking. If you park the car and waited on the side of the road for the road to open, you may be there a while. If you're baking or cooking something and you discover you don't have all the ingredients, you may substitute one ingredient that you do have for another that you don't have. If you're running errands and one of the stores that you wanted to stop at first is closed, you may decide to add that stop to the bottom of your errand list or save it for another day. If you are planning a trip to the park and the weather looks threatening, you may decide to stay home and build a chair and blanket fort with your children. Those are examples of flexible thinking. And flexible thinking has many benefits. It helps children adapt to unexpected changes. It helps children learn that changes or setbacks don't have to be disasters. It gives children a chance to practice problem solving and creatively thinking about new solutions. And it can help children develop their perspective-taking skills by incorporating others' ideas and solutions to the problem that they're facing. Flexible thinking is an important tool in helping children who are learning new skills like reading and writing. Learning that the same word can mean different things and can be used in different ways, or that some phrases have multiple or deeper meanings, are all part of flexible thinking. Think of the words like wind and wind. They are spelled the same, but they have different meanings. Think of phrases like don't cry over spilled milk or that costs an arm and a leg. There are many idioms, metaphors, and similes that require some level of flexible thinking in order to understand them. When children struggle with flexible thinking, it can affect their academics. Reading and writing skills both require flexible thinking for kids to master over time. Similarly, having flexible thinking with math allows students to think about different ways to get to a solution. A fun math game for children, 4-way countdown, allows children to use addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division to achieve the goal of the game. Children can grow into the game as they learn new basic arithmetic operations. This can be a fun game for the whole family. There are conditions that make flexible thinking difficult. Children can be exposed to high levels of stress, conflict, uncertainty, and traumatic events. These situations can make it difficult for children to develop flexible thinking. Some of the very times when flexible thinking are needed are when they're least likely to develop. Parents can minimize this distress and buffer children from the stress of uncertainty. One protective factor parents can have in place is knowledge of child development and effective parenting practices. Learning new skills as a parent, better understanding your child, is something that you're doing each time you listen to this podcast. Thank you. We will talk more about protective factors in a future episode. There are many ways that parents can build and strengthen flexible thinking in their child. One way is to read books that challenge children to think more flexibly about the words and situations. Books like the Amelia Bedelia series by Peggy Parrish and her nephew Herman Parrish are a series of stories about what happens when the main character takes words and phrases literally. Parts, More Parts, and Even More Parts by Ted Arnold is a fun way to see how words and figures of speech can seem silly. And lastly, There's a Frog in My Throat by Lorene Leedy and Pat Street help children to interpret hundreds of phrases that we often use about animals that have double meaning. Now that's the cat's pajamas. Another strategy that parents can use starting today is to model flexible thinking. At the beginning of this episode, I described common situations many of us face in our day-to-day activities. How often do our children get to see us in action as we adjust to new information or manage disappointment and setbacks? Mostly, we just quickly problem solve this in our head. Instead, when this happens, talk out loud about the situation, how you felt about it, what solutions you considered, and how you resolved it. When it comes to playing games, be creative. With certain board games or card games, it's fun to change the rules a tiny bit by going backwards around the board or making a different card be the wild card. Several thousand different games have been created with a standard deck of 52 playing cards. While your child may only know a few of them, it takes some flexible thinking to imagine and learn new rules for different games from the same deck of cards. How many versions of the simple game of tag do you know? There are over 30 different ways to play tag. There is freeze tag, blob tag, ant tag, statue tag, shadow tag, chain tag. You want to learn more about these versions of the game? Use Google. Tag. You're it. When children learn about new rules and new adaptations to games that are already familiar to them, they are learning about flexible thinking. Have you ever had a sleep-in Saturday or Sunday? Have you ever decided that it was pajama day for at least part of the day? These are examples of flexible thinking. Small, practical, and fun changes in the typical routine can help children to become more flexible in accepting changes in routines. While this does not always go over well with children struggling with disorders such as autism, having thoughtful and fun changes in routine around meals, clothing to wear, or what plans happen that day can help children adapt to other kinds of changes. Consider the excitement that teachers and schools generate when children are encouraged to wear themed outfits or clothing like pajamas or favorite sports team jerseys or favorite book heroes or heroines to school. They are engaging in teaching flexible thinking. When flexible thinking is called for with your child, focus on the emotions of the moment. You may say something like, "Yes, you were really looking forward to spending time with Grandpa fishing. He had to cancel because it is raining too hard, but he promised to go when the weather was better. And because we can't go fishing, we now have a chance to do these two things. Which of these two things would you like to do today?" Or, if one craft project idea runs aground due to lack of supplies, what can be done with empty toilet paper and paper towel rolls, marbles, and a little masking tape? Stretch your child's imagination and ability to incorporate new information into a story. There are many versions of this game. One version, the Yes and Then game, can encourage children and parents to build a story, sometimes fanciful, sometimes silly, sometimes clever, based on the last line shared by one of the others playing the game. 2 or more can play this game. Here's an example. Once upon a time, there was a little horse who loved to eat corn. Yes, and then one day when he was eating corn, he ran into a goat who was trying to escape the farm for an adventure. Yes, and then they went into the forest, which was deep and dark, and got lost. Yes, and then they came upon a small cottage with a warm light shining through the window. Yes, and then a funny old man came out to greet them carrying a bucket of strawberries. This story could go on and on. Each person participating in the story has a chance to take the story in a new direction. This helps to develop flexible thinking. Just when you thought you knew where the story was going, it changes direction. There are many building toys such as Legos, blocks, magnetics, wedgets, Lincoln Logs, and erector sets that can foster problem solving as children learn to make new creations to play with. Some art projects allow for creativity and thinking outside the box or coloring outside the lines. Consider making things, art, with no specific instructions. Some children may struggle with what to do. Others, unleashed from guidelines, can create incredible masterpieces of art using paper, towel tubes, masking tape, glue, crayons, and crumpled up paper. To recap, in this episode, we introduced the concept of flexible thinking, which is the ability to manage disappointment and problem solve using new information to handle the situation in a different way. Flexible thinking is crucial for helping children to self-regulate and learn. When kids don't develop this skill, they struggle with rigid thinking, which can cause problems with learning, behaviors, and social relationships. Flexible thinking skills can be learned, and parents can teach by modeling and sharing their own experiences out loud, reading children's books that stretch children to think differently, playing games with changes in the rules, playing old games with new versions, changing up routines once in a while for fun, using art to encourage creativity, and using collaborative storytelling to develop fun stories with many interesting twists and turns. So the next time you're stuck with a problem, or your child is stuck with a problem, consider if this is an opportunity to model or teach flexible thinking skills. Thank you for tuning in and considering this parenting topic. I hope that this information added to your growing toolbox for parenting your child or children. Please consider exploring other topics in this series. Remember, no one parenting tool can do everything. We need many tools to become the best parents for our children. Your children's future depends on you and the time and effort you invest in them today.